Do what? You start lecturing, everybody leaves.
You want to go to their correct book?
I've got a weird way of doing it. David wants a cool job at a subpar service I'm hiring. What do you shake your head for?
Oh, that's so poor about the service.
Document that. What?
2 years of experience, so
For what?
to be here.
Girl Scout delivered some cookies to our.
It's not a requirement, it's just something to look for. Being green and getting control of the rules is sometimes intimidating people, but I've hired people that have, my assistant chief had zero.
All of my.
Not. I mean, so we don't have, not, the insurance itself is good, but spouse and children, like, what do we have, 1,052? We do have paid holidays in the PTO. Huh?
Are you going full time or part?
Both. The Bennies are real bad. Part-time.
I don't care.
You do get holiday pay. Yeah. So,
I got two jobs.
We always.
What do I have to do my uncle's?
so normally it's 36 hours a month, but like people that are in class here that I know show up and like, we've had problems before. It's like, I'm taking a class at JCTC and they never showed up and then they dropped out. Like, I'm still in class. Yeah, fuck yeah. So if you're in here, I'm a little more lenient because I know that you're showing up.
Yes.
Things, so as long as there's an effort, you get like 12 or 24. We do 12 or 24. All right. A lot of what we're going to go over today is review, but judging by a few questions on that test, we can probably use it. This is going to be fairly dry, but again, all of us, most of us have bad habits that we probably need to break, or we have to realize that with the repertoire of items that you will have access to after the class, you may need to adjust your way of thinking and doing certain things. Mother. So scene size up is the initial first stage of every emergency that starts when? Dispatch. You'll make critical decisions about a scene and take necessary time to assess situations. Never run. If you do your ride time here and you see me running, just don't ask questions. Move with me in the same direction that I'm going. Because if you see me running, or any of my people running, except for Derek runs all the time because he's high strong. But other than Derek, if you see any of us running, just don't ask questions and join us because something's wrong. But yeah, if you're running on scene, you need to calm down because you're causing stress to you, your patient, people watching, and it looks like you don't know what you're doing. And quickly determine whether the scene is safe. Again, this is going to start from dispatch. I know it sounds stupid, but having an idea, if you're dispatched to a chest pain or difficulty breathing or whatever, it's good to start getting in the process of these are the things that it could be based off this dispatch. If I get a shit dispatch, then these are the things that they typically are. This is the equipment that I could need. These are the medications that could be involved. Here we operate under the pretense that all breathing is cardiac and all cardiac is breathing until ruled out otherwise. So if you have one system in play, you should always check both systems. And that's something that you should get into the habit of. That way that alleviates you from getting tunnel vision. After your initial scene assessment, you can report. I don't know why you would do that because they don't listen in the first place. If you'd like to report to dispatcher what you got going on and what you need and what you're doing, that's fine. Obviously if you need additional resources, that's something that you need to do while you're en route or once you first get on scene. It is, you got that frequent flyer that that it's a BF call, but they always go to the hospital and they weigh half a metric ton and it's, 200-pound providers, you're probably going to need some lift assist. There's no reason to wait till you get there to request it. Go ahead and say, we're dealing with so-and-so, send all you got plus a forklift, right? Whatever you need to help your situation in hand. Emergency scenes, as we all know, can be dynamic. They can change suddenly. Again, I told you before, and I'm going to keep warning you, that way there's no excuse when we get to that time. When we do scenarios, I will expose you. And that is it's not to make you feel bad, it's to make you be hyper aware of your surroundings and understand that things change. People can change, people's families can change, the scenario can change, and you need to be hyper aware of your surroundings at all times. Again, formulate some type of plan when you get a dispatch. What are you going to do? Obviously, we don't carry the entire truck inside, or you shouldn't, on every call. But I am a believer that on all type of code-free runs per se, and I don't mean all just because we know that some shit gets knocked out to an emergent status, and some of you operate under your own pretense or whatever. Anything that's dealing with heart, lung, or brain, I feel like you should bring a monitor in with you every time. Do I bring a monitor in when we have a possible, laceration to the shin? No. Now, if they say excessive bleeding and blood squirting everywhere, I might bring it in, right? But we don't need to bring a backboard, a stretcher, suction, jump bag, feed bag, and all that shit in every time. You need to make the best judgment call that you can make. But also not bringing in anything is doing a disservice to you and your patient. Like just walking up with a stretcher and like, we'll go to the hospital, let's go. Like that's not how you should do things. Your experience with location may alert you to possible hazards prior to arrival. Again, we all have those areas in our service area, cities, towns, neighborhoods, whatever you want to use that, you probably hang out with, and some that you don't mind committing a few traffic violations to get out of. So it's no different when you're responding. Determine if you need a stage, depending on the call. If you don't feel comfortable approaching the scene based on the call, that's fine. If you need additional resources to check it out when you get there, then request them. Determine the nature of the incident. Medical, you're going to have the nature of illness, and trauma, you're going to have the mechanism of injury, right? What you may need. Efficiently and effectively do your scene size up will help with what actions you're going to need to have in place. Your accident can reveal those MOIs. What type of road was it? What did they hit? How many occupants? Were they restrained? Was it a one-way hit? Was it a two-way hit? All of those things. Because a lot of people that I've noticed through my years of working here and other places and teaching and being kind of in that just Hawkeye role when I have students that I go out and watch, is a lot of us forget like if someone hits a telephone pole at 120 miles an hour, we're all gonna freak the fuck out, because like that's gonna sound bad, right? But a lot of us forget that a head-on collision and vehicles are moving 40 miles an hour respectively is the same as a 90 to 100 mile an hour impact to a dead object. So just because they're low speeds, 40 mile an hour collision that's head on, like, oh, that's not that bad. That hurts. That's no different than hitting it at 80, 90 miles an hour head on. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's just a little fender bender. No, like just because it wasn't at highway speeds or interstate speeds doesn't mean that there's not a great mechanism of injury there. Estimate the degree of energy transfer. Again, going back to how fast were they going and what did they hit. Possible seriousness of injuries. Remember, on accidents, if there's a fatality in the same compartment, all patients were exposed to the same type of inertia and energy that was transferred to that person to kill them. Now, if they were yeeted 50 feet from the vehicle, they've experienced a little bit more energy. But if it's a closed compartment, then you have that to consider. Learn to use all your senses, be aware of your surroundings. You have to be able to adapt on the fly. Sometimes you might have to change your strategy, your thought process, what you're going to do, or realize that dispatch or the caller that dispatch relayed information was completely wrong. You got this big old game plan formulated, and you get there and go, this is nothing like they said it was. You can't get tunnel vision, you can't freak out, you need to adapt, overcome, and improvise. Common risks for us, the HIVs, the HEPs, the TBs, and any other type of bacterial viral infections. We're not necessarily dealing with the healthiest or cleanliest people. So you have to remember that I assume, I'm going to talk up 2 sets of my mouth real quick. Do as I say, not as I do. Very rarely do I wear gloves, and that's my problem. But you need to assume that everybody has something. We'll just start there. But you need to have gloves and, your equipment as needed, depending on the run. Standard precautions, again, if we're birthing a baby, our standard precautions we're going to use are going to be slightly different than our normal medical call. You need to have,
Nothing.
So why are we talking? We need to do what we can to reduce the risk of transmission to us and from us as well. Assume every person is infected. All EMS personnel use the same standard precautions with every patient, unless that patient is going to present differently, obviously. We all went through COVID when everybody wore a mask. That kind of changed our outlier of things. Again, if you're birthing a baby, you're going to want a gown, maybe a face mask and a nose plug and some other things. PPE, hand hygiene, again, hand sanitizer is good in a pinch, but we all need to wash our hands with soap and water. Protective gloves, masks, eyewear, HEPA 95 gowns, all of those things we can use. When finished with PPE, place contaminant items in a bio bag. Again, not everything goes in a bio bag. There's blood, some type of CSF, or some type of discharge from a appendage of the lower body, then that can go in a bio bin. But just because we did a glucose check and we got a drop of blood doesn't mean we have to dispose of bio. There needs to be a significant amount. Same thing with towels. If we just wipe up a little bit of blood, it can get thrown away. If it's soaked, it needs to go in bio. Cleanliness and personal hygiene will help prevent infection of you as well and them. Most important infection control is hand washing. Again, we don't have sinks on our trucks, so hand sanitizer will work in a pinch. I know we all probably have used those purple top Virex wipes that say don't put on skin. I probably bathed in those more than I have in a shower. We'll see what that looks like in like 10 to 20 years. We don't know. But when you have access to a sink, you need to use it. In every patient contact and decontamination procedure, wash your hands thoroughly. Obviously, you should always decon with gloves on. And then if you go from item to item, you should switch gloves. If you had a patient on the stretcher, but they didn't touch the monitor, you don't want to finger fuck the stretcher and then go clean your monitor and grab on the back and then not wipe the back. So just consider that as well. priorities on scene: you, your crew, other people responding, your patient, and then bystanders. These people are last. They chose to be there and they have nothing to do with it. They're a bunch of Facebook warriors that want to post that there's a wreck somewhere. If they choose to walk on the road and get smoked by a car, they will then move themselves into fourth place after you're done with them. I know Indiana has a new rule. Bystanders must stay back 25 to 50 feet, or as they see fit of interfering with the scene. If people do not abide by that, you can call the popo and they can stand around and probably tell them to move back and then not do anything about it. But that is a thing. We've pressed charges on 2 people here for interfering with scenes that were refusing to comply with our orders just because they're known in the area and I'm tired of them. But that is now a thing for your safety and your patient's safety, is not to have everybody all up in your business. Quickly determine the hazards. Again, when you get out, when you're rolling up, whether it's a car wreck, even a house, look at what it is. Is it well kept? Because if it's not well kept on the outside, it sure as hell ain't well kept on the inside. That can expose hazards, contaminations, things like that to you inside. Look for power lines, look for blind spots in the curb. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, is especially on car wrecks. It's just, coming over a hill and there's a wreck and we're just going to stop at the other end of the hill. That way, Leroy and his buddy that are coming over in the Dukes pop that hill and create the back of your ambulance. You need to park where you can be seen before the accident, not after. Look for blind curves. Just because most people don't pay attention, that's why you're there in a wreck in the first place, so you don't cause another one. You have no obligation to enter an unsafe scene unless you are trained and equipped. Again, if you feel like it's now, you can't just be like, I don't feel safe, so I'm not going because I don't like that person. You have to articulate why it's not safe. And you need to utilize the resources of the people that can deem it safe. But if there's ever a question, your safety comes first. Harmless looking scenes can turn into disasters. That is true. If you're not sure that it's safe, do not enter. That is one of the biggest things that we're most vulnerable in. Obviously your police departments carry tasers and guns, and some of them still carry asps and pepper sprays and all of that stuff, right? Fire departments, they don't really have protection, but very rarely is there 2 of them responding to a call. There's usually, 3 or 4 of you on an engine at a minimum.
Yeah.
We're 2. We're 2 unarmed, unprotected people with a radio that works sometimes. So we have the least amount of protection to our advantage, and we go and typically, police know, again, not all the time, police know what they're going into by dispatch, but their dispatch can be just as wrong as ours. And typically the fire department's not going into a house unless it's on fire, and they're well aware of what their hazards are. We're going into, Meemaw's house that could have Jeffrey Dahmer in the back room. We don't know it until we get in there. This lampshade looks cool. It's skin. Be alert for your situation or feel suspicious. Trust your gut. Go with your instinct. Trust your intuition. Environmental hazards, we should all know: snow, rain, heat is a big one, cold, windy days, and then your obvious tornadoes and hurricanes and hail, all of those things. Terrain, make sure you have enough people to move patients on rough terrain, and make sure you are equipped to move certain terrain. Obviously, some of us are in better, I will tell you, I'm not an avid hiker. I'm not an avid exercise person at all. And when I ran the county to the west of here, I took hikes on the Knobstone Trail 4 times and fuck those people. Because every time it was like 5 miles in, and it was not on a trail. Like they just made their own. They're like, these riders look neat. So, and then half of them would continually move. So we'd say, sit your ass at this mile marker and you get there. And you're like, oh, we kept walking a certain direction. Which one? I don't know. So if you as a person are not built to make that hike, don't, because then you're going to have to, someone's going to have to come get you, and then we're going to still have to play Where's Waldo with the person that we're there looking for. Consider the terrain and mud, avalanches, all that kind of stuff. Crevices, rocks, and wet surfaces are going to be our biggest feat around here. We had one of the cops that was like, "I'll go get him," and he jumped on a log and there's a bunch of moss on it and made it exactly negative 3 feet. Because he pushed, went backwards, and bounced his face off the log. And they're like, "That's neat." I'm fine. You're bleeding. Again, if you have to move over the terrain, try to carry a path, equal or even path, even if it is a little bit out of the way. Have enough rescuers to carry that person. I would tell you after about 3 miles, you get in fuck it mode and you just start dragging. And then only lifting over obstacles you can't drag over. But again, your safety is priority. Water, rescue scenarios, standing or rushing water. Water, I will tell you from my diving experience and swift water experience, water is one of the most deceiving things that you'll ever encounter because the surface does not dictate what's going on underneath. You know, I lived on the beach in Florida for 16 years, like on the beach, water beach. And how many people had to get rescued because it'd be a calm day and there'd be yellow or red flags and people are up and like, "Oh, it's fine." Undertow just takes them out. Where'd they go? To Jesus, where they went. Water is one of the most deceitful things. It only takes a few inches to move a several thousand-pound vehicle. So never put yourself in the situation of being in water if you're not trained to be in it. Then you have the whole cold factor and all of that stuff as well. Or you can have amoeba go up your pee hole and get an infection too. Nasty water. Reach, long pole, throw device, boat. That's usually going to cause a response from a specialized group, whether it be fire department or DNR or somebody that's usually going to bring a boat. I don't know many EMS services that have a dedicated boat that only do EMS. It's usually a fire side or a DNR side of things. You can go if you have the experience. If you do go in the water, even with experience, you should have some type of anchor point. Don't just wade out there. Have a rope or something around you to go where you're going. That way, if you get sucked, the people that are paying attention can pull you back in. Be aware of life dangers and obviously wear your floaties if you do go in the water. Swift water involves underwater terrain situations that can pose unique challenges. Dams are one of the most notorious unsafe areas for water, even dam breaks. And I'm not talking about the one down in Ohio where it's like, "Oh, goddamn, that's a dam." Like even the ones that are just slate rock that cause a backup of water and the water pours over at a small rate. That whitewash there is one of the most dangerous places you can ever be, even when it looks calm. Nope. Electricity. Our body does not like electricity that it doesn't create. Power lines, lightning, battery cables, or vehicles in general can discharge themselves, especially as much as they're pushing EV vehicles. All of that can be dangerous. Assume everything is energized and dangerous until, you know, it's been remediated. Even with, I don't know if it's changed. I know when I did all my auto extrication stuff, even after you cut the battery cables on the vehicle, there's still a 3 to 4 minute latency time with the airbags to deploy. Is that still a thing? So if you ever like go to assess the patient, the airbag hasn't deployed, don't stick your head in and be like, "What's wrong?" You headbutt each other.
The newer cars have got a specialized battery just for the airbags now. Like, you can't hardly find it. They've got a built-in battery system.
So just be conscientious of all that stuff that's still energized. If you have to, you know, we have been in situations here where we haven't been able to reach people because of whether it be power lines, water, or a combination thereof, that you can use the little, you know, the thing that you yell at people and fuck around with on your downtime on the ambulance. You can use those in a professional manner and give them directions to do or not do things. Huh? Did they really?
Stop yelling at homeless people while driving down the highway.
Lightning strikes pose a significant hazard. It's one of the top 3 causes of environmental deaths. I personally know someone that has been struck by lightning not once but twice. They're still alive. They're blind, but they're still alive. You can have injuries, obviously respiratory and cardiac arrest, skin, blunt force trauma. If it starts lightning or any of that, or inclement weather happens, seek indoor shelter because, you know, we can just like drive your car and bring confined spaces. Those are very dangerous as well. Those are usually a highly specialized group of individuals, again, whether coming from the fire department or a specific rescue group. I'm not, after I did the grain bin class, I was not a big fan of confined spaces after that. That shit's scary. But again, you can have confined spaces and some type of building collapse or certain things as well. You'll have oxygen deficiency, toxic or explosive chemicals, cave-ins, electricity, structural collapse. Again, don't put yourself in any harm's way and call a specialized team needed for that.
Also got one of the largest cave systems in the world.
We do. I think we've got, within like a 50-mile radius of here, we have like, I think 20-something% of like explorable caves in the area in the United States. It's something crazy. Maybe it's 150. I don't know.
400 some odd caves alone that's been documented.
Yeah, it's some of those people enjoy that stuff. And my neighbor doesn't, like in his free time. Yeah, no thanks. Atmospheric toxicity, you can have oxygen deficiency, there can be combustibles, there can be, again, a lot of the stuff that's hazardous to us, we can't see or smell. You don't know it until people collapse. So it's in the blue canary, the brown birds up there first, and if they fall over, don't approach. Make sure you're seen as secure and wait for assistance. Hazardous material, again, with I-65, 265, 465, what are all the 65s you got running? 64, 71s, all of those down there. Those are huge expressways for toxic chemicals that get transported every day. And if they're under 1,000 gallons, they don't have to be marked. And a lot of that stuff just goes up and down the interstate, and we don't fucking know what it is. That's an IDEM and the EMA problem, but again, we're going to be exposed to those people, those patients. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody saw on the news a month or two ago, we had a bunch of hazardous materials and a tanker collide on the interstate, burnt our interstate, killed 3 people. We were exposed to a bunch of shit just from the off-gassing of it. It was not a fun time. But again, it's one of those things we're there, we're going to try and do what we can, but
Is that the one that was shooting at you guys?
no. Now, this is the one that was like 2 o'clock in the morning. Thermal injuries, asphyxiation, neuromuscular paralysis, coma, death. Those are all things that can happen from those toxic materials. Again, like here we carry SCBAs in all our trucks just because depending on where we go in the county, we don't know what type of response we're going to get. So we've got people, and most of them are hazmat trained to some extent. And then also, I mean, like I stated, I know a couple classes ago, we got 3, one of them is awful, and then 2 other ones, companies within our county that if certain things mixed at one of the things here, like I said, there'd be a half-mile crater. But like the whole business itself is in the, like not in the ground, but has a brim around it and it's recessed into the ground. Like when you pull it, just because of to alleviate from the potential of hazardous spreading. And it's in a, what is that thing called?
Base?
Huh?
A base?
No, like what are the little fucking hills called?
Berms.
Berms, yeah, like it's all the way around. Then we also have the interstate that runs, or the railroad that runs through a lot of our counties as well.
And the pipelines that not a lot of
Yep. There's some examples that are in your book on a certain page, I'm sure. Like those guys, they got big sets of cojones tonight. No, thank you. Several training levels exist for managing hazardous material. And then there's several, obviously, PPE factors that start at a level 4 and go all the way up to a level 1, or I think they're D now all the way to A. I think they changed the name, but same concept. Binoculars may be your best tool. Some of our trucks have them where and I'll wait. Let EMA waddle up there and tell me what to do. Oh, okay. Stage your vehicle uphill, upwind. Obviously, you don't want to be sitting in a valley, which I have experienced. We had our chlorine thing rupture here, I don't know, 10 years ago. And they're like, stage down here. And we're like, no. They're like, yes. We're like, no. And they pulled us down there, and then none of us could breathe because chlorine is fairly heavy, and it's set in the valley that we're parked in. We're all over there like, you guys should probably move. Like, you fucking think? So always be uphill, upwind. Keep people away from the scene. You know, do your best, but that's not our job. Don't get in a fight with somebody telling them to get out. They want to help themselves into the scene and put themselves at risk. That's fine. They can call another ambulance. Don't enter a scene unless you're properly trained and equipped. Please don't be a hero and just be like, I got this, and then you've not got this, because then we've got a bigger issue at hand. Assume all patients are contaminated and immediately call for help. Some of those are going to need decon, some of them won't. Don't rush in, don't assume anything. That's the big one. Don't become a victim. Don't taste, smell, or touch foreign substances. This is probably one of the things that we probably get exposed to more than those others, is just violence of some sort. Whether it be domestic violence, like not that, but just the scenes, or car wrecks and people are going at it. We had one when I was over at the county of the West here, car wreck, people were fine, and they went to knockout brawl in the middle of the bypass. Like, they both went to the hospital for their injuries from the fight, not the car wreck. Like, fucking idiots. But that can happen. Stay safe. Again, don't approach the scene unless law enforcement has secured it. Do not assume because police are on scene that it's safe. They've got their own stuff to worry about. And obviously anything can escalate. As soon as the police turn their back, somebody can pull some bullshit. They're as limited on resources as we are. So, they may not have 12 of them show up to control the whole scene. They're going to do the best with what they got. Keep your level of situational awareness up, and always give yourself a point of exit. Look for signs of trouble. The law does not expect you to put yourself in grave danger to provide care. So if something gets out of hand, I don't know how many times I've told people on scene, unless you exit, I'm going to leave, and your family member, your person, your whoever is going to die if you don't quit. Those are your two options. Relieve yourself from the situation, or relieve yourself from your family member. One of those things is going to happen. Again, always have a way out. Never let yourself get trapped inside a room. Crime scenes. See the TikTok the other day, dealing with times. Pretty funny. Dangerous weapons are probably involved of some sort. Perpetrator still may be on scene or could return. I will say I've never had a Criminal Minds thing where like something happens and they're standing in the crowd with a caution tape. I've never experienced that, but I'm sure it does happen where people can return. Be alert for signs of gang activity. You guys probably have that issue down in the Louisville area. Don't really have a whole lot of that problem up here. Domestic violence can turn from bad to worse. The bigger thing there too is, we have to be hyper aware of the situation. I know that we probably all ran on some sort where, there's been some form of domestic violence, and you get there and everything's fine and no one wants to go, but you can obviously that there was some signs of distress, and that other party will prevent you from evaluating them in the truck or whatever. If that's the case, then you get the proper people there to make that happen. You've never done meth? It's pretty awesome. Don't do meth. Meth bad for you. High possibility for explosion. I know since I've worked in this county for over a decade, I think we've had 9 houses explode due to their meth labs in the house, ranging from a wall blowing out to the house being gone. We've had vehicles blow up when they used to do the old shake and bake method with the Gatorade bottles and stuff. You'd be going on the road and you see blow up. That's pretty neat. Wait for help. Family pets become safety hazards. Call for someone who works with dogs. I think we all work with dogs, because I know when we all get on the scene, we're like, animal, fuck the patient. Try to get out of that mentality. Don't. And if there's aggressive dogs, keep yourself safe. If you have to harm the dog to keep yourself safe, then rape ankle it and get back to your truck.
How much choice?
Again, situational awareness, use equipment with you as cover. Try to de-escalate situations by using calm tone and being empathetic. Try to de-escalate more than escalate. Sometimes there is a place to raise your voice, right, Tori? And then sometimes there's not. So you have to be really good at reading people to kind of determine which one is better. And you're going to make the wrong choice sometimes, but you need to work on de-escalating more than escalating. There's a time and place to escalate it, but it's not very often. Even Siri agrees. Make the effort to retreat to a safe location if law enforcement has not yet arrived. Don't turn it into a Jerry Springer show. Somebody's going to be filmed and you're going to end up on the news. Roadway rescue operations, motor vehicle crash. Greatest hazard is traffic flow. Obviously, we want our scene safe, and the state police want it open. And there's always that battle. State police cannot move your vehicle if you get out and lock it. Just word of advice. And you have to do what makes you safe. So if there's a pissing match, you make yourself safe. That way, if something happens and the state police or somebody moves your vehicle, guess who it's on at that point? Them. And that needs to be documented. Always wear your fluorescent yellow or fluorescent orange vest. I know most of our services probably use dark colors. Usually if it's blue, we got blue pants, we look like a walking blueberry. We're just blue on blue on blue. So you need some sort of bright color to protect yourself. Position your ambulance to protect you in the scene. Sometimes it's better to park behind if you know you're going to be doing stuff in front, and then sometimes it's better to park in front of it and let them crash through everybody else before they get to you. It's all scene dependent. There is no this one size fits all. But the biggest thing that you need to know is do not allow your loading area to be exposed to traffic at all. So if you're going to be behind the incident, someone needs to be behind you to protect you. Whether it's police, fire, another EMS unit, command unit, whatever, you need to be protected from that loading area. I don't know why people, especially at night, are like flies at light, blinking lights they just drive towards. And it's a bad situation. Traffic cones, flares, those LED flares can be used. Look for leaking fuel, potential of fire explosion, down electrical lines, unstable vehicles. That's a big one. If you're ever going into a ditch or it's on its top, we had one, I don't know, a month or two ago that ended up on its side in the cornfield, and we used our command vehicles because fire wasn't on scene, and sandwiched between the bottom and the top of the vehicle with our push bars so the vehicle wouldn't go anywhere. That way we could get in safely, move the patient. I mean, that's stuff that you've got to consider. Like, you don't want to get in a vehicle on its side, start helping, and then the thing roll over. That's a bad time. Sarasota. 4-point suspension. For what? I guess hating? I don't know. Eye goggles, safety goggles, hearing protection. If your service does a lot of car wrecks, it's probably good to have some sort of extrication gloves that have the bloodborne barrier protection in it, so you can kind of do both. It's still always good to wear gloves under those. Coveralls, turnout gear, steel-toed boots, something just to keep you protected. Fire truck. Again, if it's a half-mat scene, don't do anything. Wait for them to bring you the patient. Park a half mile away and don't bring a golf cart, but bring beer. And obviously their hazardous or hazmat suits range from being just kind of like the COVID stuff we wore all the way up to a banana suit with the SCBA inside. that considered a level D or C? D?
C, I think.
Because it's got the SCBA. That is a level A. There's sometimes you might need to call for people that aren't police or fire, whether that be the electric company, whether that be a wrecker, whether that be, we called one of the excavating companies because we had such a huge spill that was going, just come dump a bunch of sand to keep it from spreading everywhere. Sometimes you got to use your noggin. A lot of that times that's going to be your IDEM or EMA, but if you notice it, call it. If they don't need them when they get there, they can cancel it, but it's better just to have it around. Control your bystanders where you can. Again, that's not your primary concern. Bystanders are your least concern, and if they want to make themselves victims, then you can create them to be, in the scene. Have law enforcement establish a tape line, cordon off certain areas for you. Search area to locate patients. That's one thing that, if you respond to a wreck, there's a car seat in there, but no baby. It's always good to make sure that you check the area to make sure, ask the people, was there anybody else in the car? Sometimes they're unresponsive where you can't ask them. I know here we have a pretty good system with our law enforcement that they'll run their 2028, they'll get a phone number, they'll call family and be like, hey, do you know where this child is at? So we know if we've got one or not. We've had them be under the vehicle, we've had them be in the tree line before. So, I mean, don't just think because they're not in the vehicle that there's not another patient. Remember, MCIs are anything that exceed your capabilities of on scene. So you can have a 4-vehicle MVA and 1 ambulance, that is going to be an MCI because you've got more patients than you do providers. They can probably safely deal with that. Question you need to ask is, will it overtax your resources that you have on scene? Sometimes that you might just need to request another unit. There's sometimes that you might need to request command to come run it for you so you can concentrate on patient care and they can concentrate on the logistics. Your command person will do your scene size up. And again, even if you have to request command because they don't come or you request other units, the highest ranking person there, whether it's level of care or whatever, will be the command person until it is alleviated to someone else. So there might be a time that you have to do multiple roles. Determine the number of incidents or requested resources that are needed that aren't on scene or currently requested, and you're going to direct the oncoming crews in what we do. The more you do ride time here, you'll notice that's typically what our command staff does here is just run the scene as far as logistics. Not saying we don't interact with patient care, but that is not our primary concern. Triage person, we should all know triages, and we can rank them to whether you use SMART or JUMP or any of those. They have their own type of triaging system that, will go, this person needs to go now, this person can wait, this person can take themselves, and this person's discharged to Jesus. Like, those are all the same premise that we use, and it's what we can do for them in a high acuity situation. Prioritize immediate or delayed transport. May perform simple life-saving method. If we got to put a tourniquet on, that's fine. But we're not going to do a crike or something crazy. If we've got 50-something patients and this person's just gasping, it's one of those that you drew the short straw and move on. Do not stop to provide intensive care for any one patient. Again, tourniquets, giving someone and saying, hey, apply this bandage to your arm, we'll be back. Those are all acceptable, but dedicating yourself to a singular patient for minutes is not acceptable. Remember, mechanism of injury is going to be on traumas, combined strength, direction, nature of forces that injured your patient. Identify forces involved, directions of travel, directions in which those forces came from, and bodily locations potentially affected. Again, car wrecks, we need to look for bent A, B, or C pillars, steering wheels, dashes, intrusion amounts, direction of intrusion, shattered or spidered windshields. All of those things are to be considered. Look beyond the obvious injuries for evidence that suggests life-threatening injuries. Again, just because people were wearing their seatbelt doesn't mean they're not going to be injured. Sometimes those seat belts can do just as much damage as bouncing off the steering wheel, depending on the mechanism and which direction of travel they were coming from. That's pretty significant. Index of suspicion, that's the prediction of injuries based on the mechanism. So if you have someone jump 3 stories down onto their feet, your index of suspicion is probably going to be they have shattered legs, fibs, femurs, knees, cankles, all of those things are probably broke. Do not rule out serious injury because patients wore seatbelt, like I said earlier. Airbags prevent serious injury, but they can also do damage, but they will protect them, hopefully, from hitting the steering wheel or dashboard. But a lot of cars still operate under the assumption that if they don't hit the brake pedal, there are no airbags deployed. So people, if you got 2 people staring at the sky, just looking for Jesus, they're not paying attention, and they both head on, there's a good possibility, pressing the accelerator or not pressing the brake, there is a good possibility that those airbags will not deploy in those vehicles. Your newer cars, somebody runs a cart new, 19 airbags go off. But if you don't have, like, that's like 21 or newer, that like any impact will do it. But even up to like 2018, 19, if you don't depress the brake pedal, you won't get airbag deployment on some vehicles. If you do have airbag deployment, always lift the airbag to look for deformity in the steering wheel. And remember, those airbags are full of a bunch of nasty shit that's going to make you not breathe for 5 days, and you're going to get a hoarse voice, so try not to breathe that in. Pedestrian struck, it's all going to depend on the car. If a Geo hits me, I'm probably going to have some lower leg and knee injuries. If I get hit by an International, I'm fucked, but you know, all of my body is in play. Internal injuries are less likely at slower speeds. Gunshots, again, type of gun used, range of shot, whether we see exit wounds, and remember in our fields, we do not determine entry versus exit. It's not our place. Don't never say entry wound here, exit wound here, unless you have a degree in forensic science or criminal justice or criminology or any of those things that you went through to determine that you can for certain say one is an exit and one is an entry. Do not use that nomenclature. Determine your nature of illness, bystanders, families. To an extent, again, let your patient talk if they have the ability. Let their patient speak and tell you what's going on. You always have that overprotective person on the scene that's like, I'm feeling fine, they're feeling like shit. Okay? Like, let them talk, okay? Scene can give additional clues to the patient's condition. Sometimes nature of illness is not readily apparent. And their nature of illness may be different from their chief complaint. Any questions about any of that? Okay. We'll take them. Move over there. And that to the registry.
Grant purchase.
But we need, get all this fish from the government. So. Lots of metal on the button, so.
About you, Paul, what you thinking?
I had a rough one last night. One of my, I don't know how to describe him, but I used to work with him. He was a supervisor. Really good paramedic. Fucking probably a four or five. And we get there. Maybe 9 was like, talked to him for 2 hours, and that was but like that's the worst. He was an awesome dude. He knows exactly what to say to where we can't. Yeah, he'd be like you know, like.
That's no wishes.
But he's a cryptic enough to where he's honest with you, but you're
Fucking gut.
you know, looking at the paper. Yeah. Been to the hospital.
First things, you know, signing up.
Working
Yeah.
people. And I mean, not that's like it. From my experience, consider people two of their patients that they said were just
How long
fine.
have the VA claim this?
But the next time start shooting the randomly in multi-family apartment complexes.
Still have been.
Everybody's got a gun.
What you're saying, no.
The first guy stopped the mafia was out of the room with his ace on arms and he was just dude, he had a pistol and he was just randomly shooting cars and randomly just shooting like just objects. And one of the objects he tried to randomly shoot at was Aaron Olson, and that was a mistake because Aaron Olson had his rifle and that didn't work out too well for him. And then the next guy had PTSD so bad he thought he was back in Nam on the second floor apartment shooting at objects in the parking lot. Just so happened some of them objects happened to be the police. So they backed off. we get a SWAT call out, and he just, I mean, he fucking ready. Like, he had all the shit laid out on the bed. Like, he probably had 50 magazines full of ammunition for his rifle, ready for war. And we, unfortunately, he stuck his head out the window or poked his head out the window, and he met a 308 dome piece. And that didn't turn out too well for him. The moral of the story is Clark apparently spoke to the patient that we had EOD. And I didn't, I'm not going to give him the CYA special. You know, I was like, I can't stop. Oh, you don't know, but a little better place to even and all that.
It's very good.
You should move in Indiana.
Therapeutic communication. Something all of us should probably study and do a little bit better. As a paramedic, you must use every strategy to make sure you understand your patients and they understand you. Your tone has a lot to do with that. The word choices you use. Obviously, if you're dealing with someone simple, you don't want to use big words or medical terminology because they're going to be completely behooved of what's going on. Your facial expressions and your body language. And I think that your appearance says a lot. Adjust your communication style to fit each new situation. Communication is going to be the sender, the message, receiver, the feedback. Your sender are going to encode or create messages. Receivers decode or interpret messages, and feedback gives response to those messages. You need to know those definitions.
What is this? 3605 North Sunset Road in Austin, female. Caller to the floor, needs help out. Scott County EMS, what is this? 3605 North Sunset Road in Austin, female.
Failure to communicate can show a lack of empathy. You can have some prejudice, so you're not going to treat that patient how you normally would treat other patients, which is also bad. I know we probably all have those patients in our areas that are our regulars, and we don't take them seriously when we call, but just like the whole boy who cried wolf mentality, at some point, their complaint is going to be legitimate, and you're going to have to adjust yourself in doing that. You can have external distractions, internal distractions. You could have friends on scene, or there could be some, 98 Honda Civic with fart can on it that just keeps doing circles around your scene. That's going to obviously be distracting, and you're not going to have all your attention based on your patient. Internal distractions, you can have some issues at home, life, you and your partner just into it on the way here. Those things can prevent you from dealing with your patient well. Give me just a second. What is this? Cell phones are. What? Is this 1 month? Make me do we have a copy of this? Bill?
Yep.
That needs to go away. All of them.
Coming in right quick.
This is 715,000, the total was like 230. Trust is enabled, rapport follows. One of the biggest things you need to do is try to gain rapport with your patient. Sometimes with that, you need to realize, hey, I might not be the individual that does this. My partner's going to be better at that. You know, you've got a male, female crew, and you've got some female who just beat the shit out by their husband. I'm probably not the guy that needs to talk to her about it. Now, if certain patient care needs to take place that only I can do, then that's a whole different ballgame. But you need to make effort to say, hey, I need to keep a female back here with me, see if fire can drive, police can drive, whatever. Those things need to be done. But, you know, under that initial conversation, I'm not the guy. You know, and on the flip side of it, we had one the other day. Dude went out in the woods, was going to kill himself. Somehow, I was the person that he connected with. Like, and that's just what worked, and I stuck with him. Like, you have to be able to read the room and figure out, hey, if I got a skill set here that can help, this is not my forte. Sometimes the biggest thing you can do is remove yourself from the situation. Establish positive rapport quickly. Again, being confrontational, shitty, having a shitty tone, you know, walking and going, what the hell do you want? That's not going to start off on the right foot, and that's just going to be a downward avalanche of not funness for the conversation. Ask the right questions, respond with empathy. With a good rapport, people you are serving will follow your lead. Effective communication begins and ends with trust and rapport. Again, try to establish some type of foundation with that. And you can be honest with these people, but just tone back the honesty in which we deliver. Use good words. Never lie to a patient, never tell them no bullshit. That's my philosophy with it. Don't be like, oh, you're gonna be fine. You're not gonna be on a 72-hour hold. Feel like that's out of our control, but the more forthcoming you are with them, the better that this outcome's gonna be. Present yourself as caring, compassionate, competent, confident healthcare professional. Dress and grooming is important, 110%. While it may not be correct, in my opinion, appearance is everything, because you can be one of the most compassionate, confident, competent professionals, and if you look like dog shit, people aren't going to trust you. Because if you can't take care of yourself, why do they think that you can take care of them? And that, I firmly believe in that philosophy. You can't make yourself presentable, looks like you just rolled out of bed, smell like a bag of dicks, any of those things, like people aren't going to want to be around you. So your grooming and your dress is important. You know, having sloppy Joe stains all over your uniform and then showing up, not a very good presentation. Your voice, body language, gestures, eye contact, all of those things are important. Sometimes you want to make eye contact, sometimes you don't, because it can be intimidating to the patient. Not saying, you know, just talk to them like this, but at the same time, you don't have to have a steering contest with them. Read your room, read the patient. Be aware of your patient's comfort. You know, if you try to make eye contact and they keep looking away, that's probably a good precursor to quit staring at their eyes. If a patient is in obvious distress, try to alleviate the pain or discomfort while you interview them. Introduce yourself. Use the patient's name. I'm a big advocate of, you know, elderly people using, you know, Mr. or Mrs. or Miss, whatever. I'm also guilty of calling people just by darling or whatever as well, and sometimes they take to that just as well. Address your patient properly, modulate your voice. Change your inflection sometimes, which will help change your tone. Cadence in which you speak sometimes needs to be altered. All of it. Use professional but compassionate voice. Explain what you're doing and why. Keep a calm facial expression. If you look worried, they're going to look worried on top of their ailment. They'll be like, everything's fine when you're about to do things, because they're going to be like, no, it's not. You're not going to do this. You're about to screw up. Never do anything that you're not 100% confident in. Use the appropriate style of communication. Sometimes you have to be a little laid back like I am. You can get away with the no words. Sometimes that pieces to your population as well. I'm not saying like you have to go religious beliefs to fit in, but sometimes it's okay to be like, I don't know what the fuck's going on here. Like, dude, me either. This shit's stupid. Like, it's kind of cool. Like sometimes that works. Not with that guy though. He's gonna call and complain. Patient's response to questioning. Some people are just verbal vomit and will give you everything. Back when I was 3, I don't care. Let's speed up the process to like the last 12 hours, right? Some people will, in certain situations, will be like, yeah, I was abused and all of this stuff. And some people are like, oh, fine. I fell down the stairs twice on both sides of my head. No, you didn't. That'll be the resisting side. And then you have those people in the middle that'll give you certain tidbits of information, and you got to pick up on some of those context cues. That's my favorite thing to do. Be like, see what you did there? Gotcha. Now let's talk for real. My biggest thing is I'm not the police. I don't care. I can't tell them anything that you tell me in here. I'm here to help you with certain medications I can give that'll harm you. And if you're not forthcoming with me, then maybe I give you something, you die. Let's alleviate that, because that's not my job. Is to kill you. So be honest with me. I can't go tattle and be like, you took the dose. And they don't care that you took the dope either. Like, just let me help you, whatever the case may be. The biggest thing that you're going to see this resistance on is typically those relationship interactions or spousal interactions or child interactions. That's one of the hardest things to do when you're dealing with a kid that has potential, that can articulate, speak, and tell you what's going on, but you still have to have a guardian there during treatment. Most kids aren't like, Dad, baseball bat right in front of that. Those are the hard scenes that you have to be like, hey, you mind going in and getting his teddy bear? Like, all right, we got 38 seconds, tell me everything. And sometimes that's what you got to do. Nonverbal communications, those are big. That's how, typically me and my partner used to communicate. Steve was one of those partners that we could run an entire scene and not say 2 words together. And that's just one of those things. And sometimes you can be like that with patients. Sometimes you can be like that with other first responders, but nonverbal communication is big. The gestures, your mannerisms, your posture, all of those things, how you walk, how you carry yourself, all of those things can be typically read by the room. Distance, don't get up in anybody's bubble. If I need to smell what you ate, I'll go to lunch with you. So if not, step away. Again, remain at eye level indicates equality. So some of those times, especially with the older population, I'll get below them. If they're sitting in a chair, I'll get down on a knee. Obviously, if they're on the floor, I'm not laying with them and be like, what you doing today? But you don't want to be like standing over them and be like, what happened? Go away. So again, comfort them, show some empathy. There's your stuff. No squares, between 0 and 1.5 feet. Personal space, all of those things are probably in the chart on your book. Huh?
I'm sorry if I'm buying you.
Yeah, right now you're all in good personal space. Dropping below eye level can be helpful again in your elderly patients or your children for sure. Open stance, arm extended, relaxed. bow stance or when your arms are flexed. That's not a very inviting stance. Unfortunately, that's like my resting stance. But people don't approach me, and I'm fine with that. But again, just kind of be cognitive of your scene. If you're standing there like this with this delightful look on your face, most people would be like, nope, I'll go to someone else. So just remember that. But you can nod your head up and down, your arms crossed too, like it is a possibility. It is a one-way street, so I don't understand that. I can belittle you kindly. I don't have to be authoritative while I do it. That is one thing we do on our trucks. We carry little animals or children. Typically, it doesn't work, and then we fuck with a stethoscope or part of the monitor that we're trying to use anyway. But it's a good idea to have something to calm down. If you don't have that stuff and you can retrieve that from a car or a residence or something to calm them down, it's always beneficial. And if it's not an immediate life threat, take the extra 2 minutes to be like, can you go get their blanket, their teddy bear, their Nintendo, whatever the fuck they want, that'll calm them down. I'm sure all of you know that screams and cries echo in the back of an ambulance. Again, while interviewing a patient, use eye contact as much as possible, but not enough to be demeaning or like sexual in nature. And I know that sounds weird, but I mean, I had a complaint probably 4 or 5 months ago. I think this person was hitting on me, like to about one of my providers. I'm like, what'd they say? They didn't say anything. They just kept looking at me. Where would you like them to look? Well, it's just eye contact. So like, without them saying, I'm listening to you, that was their way of engaging with you. I guess we said it that way. Like, so again, that's the only reason I bring that up. Apparently that's the thing. I say look more frequently, just, don't be count the ceiling tiles, while stuff's going on. It just shows you're not engaged. If anybody's ever wondering if there's ever a pop quiz on $1 million price, whatever in those game shows, it's 144 ceiling tiles. Eye contact is one way to send a message. Nothing builds trust or rapport or calms a patient more than the power of touch. To an extent, again, you don't want to commit assault or battery. Like, there's that calming touch again. Assess, assault. Assess, assault. Okay, so just remember that. Can't grab backwards unless you like quadruple jointed in certain places. So again, use the back of your hand if you're going to touch someone. Touch the elbow or knee somewhere where they can't be like, grab my teddy. Like, stay away from those areas. Sometimes the knee isn't in the same area of the titty. So identify chief complaints, learn circumstances that cause the emergency, and determine the patient's condition. Ask questions, observe the patient. That's my biggest thing is I will have them do tasks while they're telling, if possible. Have them do tasks while they're telling me about it to see if I can be like, man, it really hurts when you walk. Yeah. So like, I've been having this pain and you're like, you're fine. Like some of that, because while they're engaging in conversation, they don't have the time to fixate on what their complaint is. Now, I'm not saying everybody is an unwarranted complaint, but sometimes we know we'll get through like, I got back pain and I can't take ibuprofen or Tylenol or any of that stuff. I can't take Toradol either. And you're like, oh, okay. Those people are the ones that kind of like, pat your head, rub your belly while jumping up and down. I'm telling you about this. And like, yeah, it hurt real bad. I'm like, yeah. You good? All right, cool. Ask questions, observe the patient again, gather information that is accurate, complete, and relevant to the emergency. The older population loves to give you their life stories. Just listen, unless it's like immediate, like life threat. Like when I was 12, okay, cool. But obviously, if there's an immediate life threat or something's going on, like can we fast forward a couple decades and let's go to this decade. What's happened now? Let's expedite this process. But sometimes stuff years ago might be, if I had triple bypass 10 years ago and I'm complaining of chest pain, that's pertinent information, right? So it goes both ways. Let the patient state the chief complaint in their own words. Don't let their family member say anything, and don't you put words into their mouth. Open-ended questions are key. Do not ask leading questions because they're gonna give you answers that they think that you want to give them so you can do things. Don't do that. Chief complaint should drive all other questions to be asked and continue to ask open-ended questions. Now, some of them are gonna be closed, like, do you have pain? Yes, okay. Where is your pain? Like, certain of those are gonna have to be there, like, where's your pain at? I don't have pain. And that just makes it look like you didn't ask any questions, you don't even know what's going on. So some of those are gonna be closed to start those open-ended questions. Ask direct questions when necessary. We're not playing speed round here. We're not dating in 60 seconds, so don't hit them with 9 questions and expect them to remember them all. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, and if you do it on one of my scenes, there's a good possibility you might actually catch an elbow to the chin. If people are asking questions, and I'm sure all of us are guilty of it, if I'm asking a question, I don't need Justin to come up behind me and then ask another question before the patient can answer the question that I just asked. Like, they give him this whole, Mexican standoff stage of like, who's running the scene, which question would you like me to ask first? Doesn't mean that both of you can't ask questions, but this isn't rapid fire. And I'm a firm believer to let that one person do their assessment, and once they're done, if you have other questions as a partner, then you can do the follow-up question. But don't mix 2 different lines of questioning. I'll ask my questions, and if you think there's more pertinent questions when I'm done, you're more than welcome to ask a few. Just don't do it in the middle of my question. Listen to the patient's complete response before asking the next one. Don't do that whole, I'm sorry, the middle of my sentence interrupted the beginning of yours thing. And don't interrupt if possible. Active listening. Don't develop tunnel vision from dispatch. Again, we all need something to go off of, right? But, if you, again, for us, all cardiac is respiratory, all respiratory is cardiac, so we're going to have leading questions into both. And sometimes of those things that you're going to notice, hey, I know you're complaining of chest pain on the phone, but all of your stuff seems to be abdominal. You might have to gear your line of questioning and change your assessment. Begin an assessment without any preconceived notions. Watch for subtle clues that the patient may not be telling the truth. Listen is an active skill, not a passive one. Requires your complete attention. Focus on the messenger. Watch for clues. Modify your questions that follow those clues, and provide feedback to confirm that they have understood or you have understood their information correctly. Feedback techniques. Silence, that's a good one. That just makes it seem like I wasn't listening. Reflection, facilitation, empathy, clarification, and confrontation. One of the biggest things that we fail to do, especially on these people that have an extensive history and know their history very well, they'll be like, I have this ailment XYZ. And you'll be like, oh, okay. And you have no fucking idea what that is. Don't be afraid to be like, I'm not familiar with that. Can you explain what's going on? We're afraid to ask questions and show we don't know something. So if they say, hey, I have whatever, PCOE, and your dude's in here and be like, oh, okay, we don't know what it is. Ask what it is, okay? Common errors, providing false assurances. Again, don't lie to your patients. Giving advice, like, that's kind of 50-50. Like, you're not a life coach. Like, that's not our job. But, obviously, like, I'm having difficulty breathing. We should probably stop smoking. I feel like that's pretty solid advice. Now, they might view that as confrontational, but I feel like it's pretty founded advice. Abusing authority, using avoided language, improper distancing, talking too much, interrupting, and asking why did you question. You can ask why did you in other ways. This line of questioning makes it seem what? Accusatory or confrontation. And most people don't like confrontation. So you can do this. So what caused this to happen? So what was the reasoning? Some of those things are still asking that, but it's not so like, you want to fight, motherfucker? It's not that direct. Observe your patient. during the interview. Watch for their nonverbal cues, how they're interacting. Note their appearance, their body movements. You know, if you're interviewing someone and they've got a clenched fist, probably okay to take 5 to 12 steps back. I mean, that's just reading that patient. If indication patient's hostile behavior may threaten you or your safety crew, get out. Make sure there's a path of exit. Again, use appropriate language. Most people aren't going to understand the big fancy medical terms. Use language that they can understand. Speak at their comprehension and comfort level. And obviously, you know, I'm not fluent in sign language, so that's a barrier to communication for some. If anybody's ever seen major pain, like that's about how fluent I am in sign language. Speech impediments, don't make fun of them. Don't laugh. Don't. We have one person here, awful human being, that like this person had a speech impediment, and then they like mimic their speech impediment when talking back to them, and it's like, so try not to do that. Huh? Moving on. Start the interview in a usual manner. And you're not, you know, you need to approach every interaction the same and then adjust when you realize, hey, you know, if I'm like, hey, how are you? Well, we're at a gridlock now. We have to change how we communicate, right? You're going to have to start everything the same and then adjust from there. We have those, I forget what they're called. Like 2 of the trucks have them. I don't know where they're at now. They probably lost them. But we have those translator things. If you don't have translators on your truck, everybody's got a cell phone because you're on them more. Google Translate has the thing. So as much as you're on the old TikTok and the Facebooks, use your phone for like maybe work once in a while. And if you're having a barrier to communication, you know, use your phone for Google Translate. Be like, let's try this language. And you do it and be like, okay, not that one, right? But it's a good attempt. Some people, like some police departments, have like points of contact. You know, we've got one Spanish-speaking officer here. We've got one Spanish-speaking employee that we can call and be like, hey, translate. And we'll put them on the phone, and they'll do their whole line of questioning, and they'll give us the phone back, and they're, all right, here's what's going on. Sometimes that's beneficial. Provide positive feedback. Rule out language barriers, hearing difficulties, and pathology. Children, they're not fun to deal with. We all know that. Not that we don't like kids. It's just they're kind of whiny and they don't want to communicate. And that's something you got to get around. Like, I like my kids, not your kids type deal. That's the approach that most people have. Because I can tell my kid to shut up, and I can't tell your kid to shut up. We all know as being a parent, like, it's usually, hey, shut up. That's how we get them to stop. Not a good look when I tell somebody else's 6-year-old to shut up. We have to alter the way we communicate with children. This is actually a very decent chart on what you can do in your book. You should probably highlight or mark that page. What page is it on, Jackie?
46.
46. On good ideas of how to communicate with certain age groups. Now, there's obviously going to be variations to this. Like my 11, how old is she? 11? Yep. She's like 11 going on 21, and she's been that way since she's probably been 7 or 8. So I can communicate with her a little bit differently than I probably would in this chart. But that's where you can start. With children, start by talking to caregivers and gradually approach the patient. Get down to the child's level. Some of them are small enough you can hold. I don't know why, because I don't really like other people's kids. Kids usually have an affinity for me. I end up holding them within like 5 to 7 seconds of it. I don't know why that works, but it does. Some people, you know, you need to do an assessment, but sometimes it's better for the parent to hold the patient while you do the assessment. Sometimes they'll be like, I don't know, a stranger, come here, big hugs, let's go, brother. And they'll come straight to you. You never know. But start with the caregivers. Make sure it's okay to hold their child or take their child. That can cause an introduce yourself. Obviously, if they're toddlers, they don't know what the fuck you're saying anyway. But, you know, with kids that can comprehend and understand, show them everything. Hey, I'm gonna listen to your lungs. This is just a stethoscope. Beat it, put it on you. Sometimes it's better to put it in their ears and be like, just show them what you're doing. You know, it's not a needle. It's not gonna hurt. We all know that one of the first things that kids pull away from are typically the finger probes for SpO2 because they think that there's just gonna be a nail that gets driven through their finger as soon as we put it on. Show them, hey, my finger's in here. There's no nail. Not gonna hurt. But that's how you can build some trust. Be matter of fact, use lots of eye contact, ask the child for feedback frequently. Are you doing all right? See, this doesn't hurt. All of this stuff, just to them to start trusting you. Because the last thing you want to do is like, I'm gonna check your blood sugar. This isn't gonna hurt. Lies all the time. You're fucked from that point forward. Like you just want to sign an SOR because I'm not gonna get anything done. That's how the rest of your interaction. Build trust and rapport with the parents. That's good too. You want to comfort both of them because the parent is probably in some excited mood or worried. You got this kid that's excited and worried. And if you can kind of calm them both, sometimes calming the parent first will then calm the kid, and then everybody's better. Elderly patients, be respectful. Use formal means of address. Speak slowly and clearly. Doesn't mean you need to speak like a speaking spell where you're like, hello, how are you? You don't need to do that, but sometimes you might have to increase your inflection or slow down your oxygen, your tone, or cadence to communicate with them. These people usually benefit for some type of compassionate touch. Again, assess, not assault, but putting your arm on their shoulder or their elbow or something like that and getting down on your knee or to their level can be comforting. Give elderly patients choices whenever possible. They are still humans, and as long as they're alert and oriented, not demented or something, they have just as much say-so on what goes on as anyone else. This is the age group that we usually hear them go, I'm not going to the hospital, and some type of family member is there to go, you're fucking going, Dad. Like, that's where you have that interaction go back and forth. At the end of the day, unless there's a guardianship or there's something in place, they still have just as much say-so as the next person. And you need to articulate that information to not only the patient, but to the family member as well. I can't kidnap anybody. You want to commit a felony, you're more than happy. I will not be partaking in this. They are refusing from me. They have signed my form. You do you, boo-boo. Like, that's the articulation that needs to be had. Patients with sensory impairment, blind present special problems. Yeah, like not seeing. That's a pretty big one. Don't sneak up on them. Obviously, scare the shit out of them. And always keep in contact with them so they know where you're at. Identify yourself. Nonverbal communication is useless in these cases. Like shrugging your eyebrows isn't going to do a whole lot. Voice and touch are effective tools. This is one case, like I said, to always remain in contact. Like if you're like, hey, I'm going to reach over and grab something on your bag, use your non-dominant hand, keep it on their shoulder, get the stuff out of your bag if you can, and then come back to them. That way, again, you don't go in your bag. You touch it again. Like always try to remain in contact. Angry, hostile, and uncooperative patients. These are my favorite. Understand anger is a natural part of grieving. Some of it might be venting their frustration. Just because it starts angry, that's not where you need to start. Your start needs to be at the de-escalation phase. Let's figure out why we're angry. Let's figure out why you hate the world right now. What has caused this? Sometimes after you let them vent for a minute, they'll start coming down and you can have a candid conversation. Sometimes they just remain up there and you got to get up to their level. It just depends. You have to read the room. Be non-threatening though. Sometimes, most of the time you should do this, but sometimes that's how you gain control of the scene. Is showing that you're not going to let them manipulate you the entire time. Sometimes you have to be like, no, you're fucking blood alcohol, you just blew a 0.4, you're going, like sometimes you have to put the foot down. Set limits and establish boundaries. Document all unusual situations, again, for your safety and the patient's. If blatantly hostile or your safety is in jeopardy, stay far away. Contact your command, contact police, contact what you need to do to come either de-escalate or solve the situation. Monitor those patients. With those patients, again, you need to make sure you have a clear path to exit. don't hesitate to call upon lights. Sensitive topics, again, sexual activity, that's the big one that if you can have the ability to interact with like sex, that's what needs to be done. Sometimes you might have to drop a run and be like, I'm not up for this, but this is a 2-male crew, so we're going to send the male-female crew or whatever to make sure that that patient has some comfort there if possible. Death and dying, physical deformities, domestic violence, again, and no, contrary to popular belief, women are not always the victims. That's behind it. But again, try to have that like sex so the patient is comfortable, because most of the time, again, with domestic violence, you know, you don't want to just have someone get beat by their husband and be like, hey, come talk to me. Not happening. Earn your patient's trust, try to make them or her feel better. Sexual history taken later during history, it can be part of the present illness or past history, depending on the chief complaint. Again, remain calm, non-judgmental is real big, remain objective regardless of how your patient answers. Silence, stay calm, observe the patient's nonverbal cues. We've all had that one patient we've asked questions to, and they just can be a hard ass, and that's fine. Read their body tone and what's going on. Sometimes you can read that you'll make headway, and sometimes you know that. Some of us are better at breaking the silence than others. Just depends on what your strong suit is. Overly talkative patients, expect a less comprehensive story because they just are going to go off on 19 tangents while you're trying to figure out what's going on. Briefly give the patient free rein, but try to bring them back in when they're focus on the important areas. Ask closed-ended questions to these people who are going to be there forever. Interrupt frequently to kind of regain that control. Patients with multiple symptoms challenge to discover the chief complaint. That's when you have to ask, if you had to pick one thing that's bothering you the most right now, what are we picking? I understand your legs, your toes, your wrists, your ankles, your back, your knees, and your head hurt. Which one hurts the worst, right? You have to start somewhere. Sort through all that information, recognize a pattern that can lead to a correct field diagnosis. Anxious patients, encourage them to speak freely. Get them to, sometimes people's anxiety is going to be because they're out in a public place and they got 97 people watching them. Sometimes the best way is going to get them to the truck. Some people are like, I feel enclosed in this ambulance. Sometimes, you know, getting to the ambulance but not in it is a good way to calm them down and then make progress. You just have to figure out what's going on with those patients. Intoxicated patients, we all know they're irrational. They disrupt your control of the scene, rarely allow you to examine them. Make sure that your scene is safe and PD is there in case they get belligerent. Those people can take on Conor McGregor and they will challenge anybody. So being confrontational with them is not always the best idea. Usually ends up in some type of scuffle. Crying patients, form of venting, try to accept it. Like, don't sit there and be like, will you stop crying, please? Like, that's not a good way to gain rapport with your patient. If you could stop, that would be great. It's really bothering me. Don't do that. Depressed patients, depression is lethal to an extent. Recognize its signs and evaluate its severity. Ask about suicidal risk. Don't be like, you suicidal? Like, that's not how we lead with that. Warm the water, put your toes in. Ask a couple precursor questions before we dive right in. What kind of history do you have? Have you had any issues with this before? Are you medicated for your depression? Do you feel like your medication works? Has this stemmed into anything else? Have you ever had any ideas of hurting your, like, don't just smoke them with the confusing behaviors. You may encounter patients who you just can't fucking follow. All over the place. Just let them talk. In those cases, you're not going to come up with something. Most of these times, it's either because of substance or behavioral or mental issue. Typically, they burned all their neurons with some sort of drug activity, or they have a chemical imbalance that's just all over the place. And we use the taxi as that point. Just prevent them from, bizarre activities, prevent them from causing harm to themselves or you, and just get them where they need to go. How many of you have know that you have an excited delirium protocol? Okay. That is a real thing, and that is a scary thing. If you've ever dealt with true excited delirium, if you've ever dealt with PCP or back faults, it's that times like 10. And they can be difficult circumstances. Delirium is commonly in acutely ill or intoxicated patients. Dementia is usually in your elderly. Dementia is more of a long-term thing. That delirium is pretty acute and quick onset, but it can last for a hot minute. And they have to be medicated to get them out of that delirium state. Those people, you're not reasoning with them. I had refrigerators thrown at me, legitimate refrigerators. Those people typically, I would say 9 times out of 10, you're not talking down, you're not reasoning with. That's lawn darting them with ketamine until they fall over like a rhino and get into the truck. You have to be conscientious of your safety at that point. Those delirium patients are the ones that you typically see that end up getting tased or shot by the police just because they're not complying. They're going all over the place. They are charging, like, not saying that it's unjustified, just saying those are the people that there is no reason. Those are the psychiatric cases that you see do not end up well. Patient with limited intelligence. Or as Alan from Hangover would say, retards. Do not assume patients will not be able to provide accurate information. A lot of the times, these patients are very knowingly of their medical conditions, and they can articulate that as such. Try to evaluate their educational and mental abilities of how they can communicate. And if you suspect severe mental retardation, obtain history from family, friend, caregiver, whatever the case might be. I am a firm believer you can get information from friends and family when your patient cannot talk or that patient is intoxicated when they're not cooperating. Outside that, you need to obtain history from the patient itself.
Field 1, for transfer from Field 5 West Fairgrounds Road at Health Medical, in that your FEMA request, so anymore.
They're at Floyd and they want to go shit.
Second, EMS Field 1, 800 female 8th at that Health Medical, 705 West Fairgrounds, West 15.
One thing that we need to remember is, I know Scott County and Clark County are notorious for it. Everyone gets dispatched before EMS does, regardless of what the call is. Whether it's a shooting or a fall, the police and fire are knocked out before we are, for whatever reason. So it's a good possibility that prior to our arrival, you're going to have some people that are cross-trained in their profession, plus some type of medical saving capability, may already be there. Please respect them and get their report. Trust but verify. Listen to what they say and don't think you're an idiot. That's not true. Listen to what they say, get their report, but don't take it for the red words. Confirm anything that they've told you, especially stuff that might seem out of the sort. So we all know we've got, they're alert and oriented. Okay. Blood sugars and vitals are one of those things that I will listen to. I will say thank you. Appreciate you guys for doing that, but I will not treat off of their stuff. But I just don't. I'm not going to be like, their blood sugar's 40, give them D50 and it end up being 400. Be like, well, we're a pickle. So trust but verify. Integrate information they give you into questions you ask. There's a good possibility a lot of the information they got is legitimate. So, you know, the last thing people want to do is repeat themselves. So if you can start with something they've given you to be like, okay, so, you know, don't be like, so what's going on today? You just make them do that. I already told that guy what's going on. That agitates people. So if you can take what they've given you and start your line of questioning there, you know, go in and be like, so I heard this is going on. Yeah, that's what's going on. Just have them confirm. That way, you know where you're starting and what you've been told is factual, and you can build off that. The last thing they want to do is repeat themselves. Any questions? Since we have a minute, we will take an hour lunch. We'll be back at 1 o'clock, and we will resume our didactic lecture.